The only problem with you, Tenley, is that you've become utterly predictable. Darling, Atticus purred, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he adjusted the knot of his expensive silk tie. A cold knot tightened in Tenley's stomach, a familiar clenching she'd grown accustomed to. He had no idea, of course, that her son, Lachlan, a child of preternatural observation, had seen everything. The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport were a harsh, unforgiving glare on Tenley's eyes that Thursday night. She was tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeped into her bones, a weariness of the soul she'd carried for months without truly understanding its origin. Atticus Thorne, her husband of 8 years, stood beside her, radiating his customary polished perfection. His custom-tailored grey suit was immaculate, his leather briefcase clutched in one hand. The expensive cologne she'd gifted him for his last birthday, a faint, lingering promise in the air. To any casual observer in the bustling terminal, they were the epitome of success, the enviable power couple. He, the dynamic executive, always jetting off to crucial meetings. She, the devoted wife, sending him off before a major business trip to Chicago. If only those observers knew the fragile scaffolding upon which their carefully constructed image rested. Beside her, his small, sweaty hand gripped hers firmly, was Lachlan, her 6-year-old son, her entire world, encapsulated in that small, fiercely held hand. Tonight, he was unnervingly still, quieter than usual. Lachlan had always been an observant child, one of those quiet, watchful souls who preferred to absorb the world from a distance rather than dive into its noisy currents. But tonight, there was something different in his deep brown eyes, a fear Tenley couldn't name, a shadow that felt alien and chilling. This meeting in Chicago is crucial. Babe, Atticus said, pulling Tenley in for a hug. It was a calculated embrace, perfectly executed for public consumption. Everything about Atticus, she was slowly realizing, was calculated. She just hadn't possessed the Rosetta Stone to decipher his intricate equations yet. 3 days, tops, and I'm back. You hold down the fort here. Right. Hold down the fort. As if her existence was merely that, a steadfast anchor to his ambition, a silent pillar while he scaled the heights of his empire. But Tenley smiled, a practiced curve of her lips that had become a second skin. It was what was expected. Of course, we'll be fine, she replied, feeling Lachlan's grip tighten, a silent, almost desperate plea against her palm. Atticus crouched down in front of their son, placing both hands on Lachlan's small shoulders. It was another practiced gesture, designed to broadcast the image of the doting father. And you, little man, you take care of Mama for me. All right. Lachlan didn't answer. He simply nodded, his eyes fixed on his father's face. That look. It was as if he were meticulously etching every detail, every feature, into his memory, as if he were seeing Atticus for the very last time. Tenley should have noticed. She should have felt the prickle of wrongness, the discordant note in the symphony of their perfect lives, right then and there. But we never notice the signs when they come from the people we love, do we? We believe we know them, that after 8 years of shared mornings and whispered secrets, nothing can truly surprise us. How spectacularly naive she had been. Atticus kissed Lachlan's forehead, then Tenley's. Love you both. See you soon? With a final, dismissive pat on Lachlan's shoulder, he turned, grabbed his carry-on, and walked toward the TSA checkpoint, a confident stride that spoke of purpose and unwavering self-assurance. Tenley and Lachlan stood there, a small island of stillness in the current of goodbyes and reunions, watching him disappear into the glittering maw of the terminal. When Atticus's figure finally vanished from sight, Tenley took a deep, shuddering breath. Come on, baby, let's go home. Her voice was weary, laced with a fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. All she wanted was to return to their sprawling house in Buckhead, kick off these uncomfortable heels she'd worn to maintain the facade, and lose herself in a mindless television show until oblivion claimed her. They began walking down the long concourse, their steps echoing on the polished floor. Lachlan was even quieter now, and Tenley could feel the tension in his small body, a rigid apprehension that vibrated through the hand clutching hers. "Everything okay? Sweetie, you're very quiet today." He didn't answer immediately. They continued their trek, passing the darkened shop fronts, the glowing flight monitors, the endless stream of people rushing with their rolling suitcases. It was only when they neared the exit, when the automatic glass doors were already in sight, that he stopped. He stopped so abruptly, so unexpectedly, that Tenley almost stumbled over him. "Lachlan, what's wrong?" That's when he looked at her. And God, Tenley knew she would never forget that look. It was pure terror, stark and unadulterated, the kind of fear a 6-year-old should never, ever know existed. "Mama," he whispered, his voice a fragile tremor. "We can't go back home." Tenley's heart did a strange, painful flip in her chest. She crouched down, her hands grasping his small arms, trying to ground herself in the sudden, irrational fear radiating from him. "What do you mean?" "Baby, of course. We're going home. It's late. You need to sleep, don't you?" His voice came out louder, desperate, bordering on a wail. A few passers-by turned their heads, curiosity flickering in their eyes. He swallowed hard, his throat working convulsively, and continued, now in an urgent whisper that seemed to come from a place of profound dread. "Mama, please, we can't go back. Believe me this time. Please. This time." And those two words were a cruel barb, twisting in an old wound. Because it was true. Weeks ago, Lachlan had told her he'd seen a strange dark sedan parked in front of their house. The same car, 3 nights in a row. Tenley had dismissed it as a coincidence, a child's overactive imagination. Days later, he'd sworn he heard Daddy talking quietly in his home office about solving the problem once and for all. She'd told him it was business, grown-up talk he shouldn't concern himself with. She hadn't believed him then. And now, he was begging her, tears beginning to well in those profound brown eyes. "This time I believe you. Lachlan, explain to me what's going on." Her voice, miraculously, came out steadier than she felt inside. He looked around, his head darting left and right, as if afraid invisible ears might snatch his words. Then he tugged at her arm, making her lean in even closer, and whispered in her ear, "This morning, really early, I woke up before everyone else. I went to get water, and I heard Daddy in his office. He was on the phone. Mama, he said that tonight, when we were sleeping, something bad was going to happen, that he needed to be far away when it happened, that we weren't going to be in his way anymore." Tenley's blood ran cold. The chill permeated her veins, turning her limbs to ice. "Lachlan, are you sure? Are you sure about what you heard?" He nodded desperately, tears now freely tracing paths down his small face. "He said there were people who were going to take care of it. He said he was finally going to be free." "Mama," his voice. It wasn't Daddy's voice. It was different, scary. Her first instinct, primal and overwhelming, was to deny it, to tell him it was his imagination, that he had misunderstood, that Atticus, her charming, successful husband, would never. But then, fragments of ignored memories began to surface, sharp shards of forgotten details. Atticus, increasing his life insurance policy 3 months ago, dismissed as a mere precaution for generational wealth. Atticus insisting she transfer the Buckhead house, the car, even their joint savings account, solely into his name. "It helps with taxes? Babe." Atticus growing visibly angry when she'd mentioned wanting to go back to work. "It's not necessary. Tenley, I handle everything." The strange, hushed calls he answered, locked in his office, the increasingly frequent business trips, and that conversation she'd accidentally overheard 2 weeks ago when she thought he was asleep, murmuring into the phone, "Yeah, I know the risk, but there's no other way. It has to look accidental." At that moment, she'd convinced herself it was about work, some risky investment. But what if it wasn't? She looked at Lachlan's terrified face, the rolling tears, the trembling hands, and in that instant, Tenley Thorne made the most important decision of her life. "Okay, son, I believe you." The relief that washed over his face was instantaneous. A brief, fragile sunrise. But it was short-lived. "So, what are we going to do?" "Good question." Her brain raced, a frantic hamster on a wheel. If Lachlan was right, and every cell in her body was now screaming that he was, going back home was a death sentence. But where to go? Whose house? All their friends were Atticus's friends, too, entangled in the same suffocating social web. Her family lived across the country, in New England, and if she was wrong, if it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But what if it wasn't? "Let's go to the car," she decided, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her hands. "But we're not going inside the house. We're going to watch from a distance, just to be sure." "Okay." Lachlan nodded, his eyes wide and trusting. Tenley took his hand again, and they walked toward the parking deck. Her heart hammered so violently she could hear the blood pulsing in her ears. Every step felt impossibly heavy, each one a treacherous journey into the unknown. The cool night air hit her as they stepped out of the terminal. The parking deck was dimly lit, a cavernous expanse with only a few scattered cars. Theirs was in a corner, a silver SUV Atticus had insisted on buying last year. "A safe car for my family," he'd said. "Safe. So what a bitter, twisted joke." They got in. Tenley buckled Lachlan into his booster seat, then herself. Her hands were shaking so badly it took her 3 tries to start the ignition. "Mama." Lachlan's voice was small from the back seat. "Yes, baby. Thank you for believing me." Tenley looked in the rearview mirror. He was curled up in the seat, hugging the dinosaur backpack he took everywhere. "I'm always going to believe you, son. Always." And in that moment, Tenley realized she should have said that sooner. She should have listened to him from the start. She drove in silence, not heading straight for their driveway. Instead, she took a circuitous route through the affluent neighborhood, finding a secluded spot on a parallel street that offered a discreet view of their house through a screen of mature oak trees. She parked in a shadowed alcove between 2 particularly large oaks, enveloped in the deep embrace of the night. From there, they could see their home. Everything looked normal. The streetlights cast a gentle glow on the sidewalk. Their manicured lawn, the welcoming porch where Atticus and Tenley had once shared coffee on tranquil Sunday mornings, the window of Lachlan's room with the superhero curtains he had picked out himself. Home. Or at least, that's what she had always thought it was. Tenley turned off the engine and the lights. Total darkness. Total silence, save for the frantic thrumming of their own breathing. "And now we wait," she whispered. Lachlan didn't say anything. He just kept looking out the window, eyes fixed on the house, a silent sentinel. And so they waited, 2 souls suspended in the inky blackness, utterly unaware that in less than an hour, everything Tenley thought she knew about her life was going to crumble into dust. The dashboard clock glowed 10:17. Minka. When Tenley began to question her sanity, there she was, hiding on a dark street with her 6-year-old, spying on her own house like some character in a B-movie thriller. What kind of mother did this? What kind of wife suspected her own husband? Of what exactly? She couldn't even form the complete thought in her head. It was too absurd. Atticus had never raised a hand to her, never yelled at Lachlan. He was a present father, a diligent provider. But was he a loving husband? The question surfaced from nowhere, catching her off guard. A sudden, brutal clarity. When was the last time he'd looked at her with genuine affection? When had he asked how her day was, and actually wanted to hear the answer? not just a perfunctory summary. When had he touched her without it being mechanical, automatic, a practiced courtesy? When was the last time she felt loved, truly cherished, and not just meticulously maintained? Mama, look! Lachlan's voice, a sharp, urgent whisper, snapped her out of her morbid reverie. Her heart spiked. A sudden, painful lurch. What? What did you see? That car. Tenley followed the direction of his small, trembling finger. A vehicle was slowly turning onto their street. But it wasn't just any car. It was a dark van. No decals. No front plate visible. The windows were tinted. So dark it was impossible to discern who was inside. The van slowed down as it passed the houses. Too slow to be someone merely passing through. It moved with a predatory stillness, like a hunter stalking its prey. Her breath caught in her throat, a ragged gasp. When the van stopped exactly in front of their house, "It can't be," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It can't." But it was. The two front doors of the van opened simultaneously. Two men stepped out, even from a distance. Even with the poor ambient lighting, Tenley could see they weren't technicians or delivery guys or anything remotely normal. They wore dark clothes, hoodies pulled up, obscuring their faces, and the way they moved was stealthy, calculated, like shadows come to life. They paused for a moment in front of their wrought iron driveway gate, scanning the quiet street, their movements unnervingly efficient. Tenley's primal instinct screamed at her to act, to call 911, to do something. But she was paralyzed, watching the unfolding horror like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. One of them, the taller one, reached into his pocket. Tenley braced herself, expecting him to pull out a crowbar, some tool to force entry. That would be a robbery. She could deal with a robbery. She could call the police, file a report, move on, rebuild. But what he pulled out of his pocket made her entire world collapse into a singularity of pure, unadulterated terror. A key. He had a key to their house. "Mama," Lachlan's voice trembled. A tiny, fragile sound. How do they have a key? Tenley couldn't answer. She was too busy trying not to throw up, the acrid taste of fear coating her tongue. The man unlocked the front door as if he owned the place. No forcing, no breaking, simply unlocked it with an effortless turn of the wrist. Only 3 people had a key to their house. Tenley, Atticus, and the spare key that was kept in his home office. Inside the desk drawer that was always locked, the 2 men entered her home, into the house, where she had slept just last night, where she had made grits and eggs for Lachlan this very morning, where she had always felt safe. Enveloped in the illusion of security, they didn't bother to turn on the lights. Tenley could see flashlight beams dancing behind the curtains, ghostly fingers probing the darkness. They were looking for something. Or worse, they were preparing something. She didn't know how long she sat there, frozen, watching. It could have been 5 minutes or 50 pibabchiti. Time had lost all meaning, warped into an agonizing crawl. All that existed was that horrific vision. 2 strangers inside her house, holding keys only her husband could have given them. Then she smelled it. At first, she thought she was imagining it, a phantom sensation conjured by her escalating fear. But it grew stronger, undeniable. A chemical smell, pungent and acrid, like cheap lighter fluid. Then unmistakably, gasoline. "Mama, what's that smell?" Lachlan asked, his voice barely a whisper against the rising tide of her terror. And that's when she saw the smoke. It started small, just a thin thread curling out of the living room window, then another from the kitchen window. And then, the glow, that sinister, hungry orange glow that could only mean one devastating thing. Fire. No. Tenley was out of the car without thinking, her body moving on instinct. A desperate, guttural sound tearing from her throat. No, no, no. Lachlan's small hand pulled her back, his grip surprisingly strong, anchoring her to reality. "Mama, no." You can't go there. He was right. She knew it, with a chilling certainty that pierced through her panic. But it was her house, her things, the photos from when Lachlan was born, chronicling his first precious years, her wedding dress, stored carefully in the closet, a symbol of a love she'd believed in, the drawings Lachlan had made, brightly coloured declarations of childhood joy, still stuck on the fridge, the quilt her grandmother had painstakingly stitched before she passed, a tangible link to a love that had truly been real, all burning. The flames grew fast, terrifyingly fast. In a matter of minutes, the living room was totally engulfed, a ravenous beast consuming everything in its path. The fire licked at the walls, shattered the windows with explosive force, climbed with horrifying speed to the second floor. Where Lachlan's room was, that's when the sirens started, a wailing crescendo piercing the night. Someone must have seen the smoke and called the fire department. The dark van sped off, lights extinguished, disappearing around the corner seconds before the first fire truck, a gleaming red Titan, appeared on their street. Tenley was shaking so violently she could barely stand. Lachlan was clinging to her from behind, his small face buried in her back, sobbing uncontrollably. Lachlan was right, she murmured, her voice raw with disbelief and dawning horror. You were right, baby. You were right. If they had gone home, if she hadn't believed him, they would be inside there right now, sleeping, unaware, and those men would have. She couldn't complete the thought, the implications too monstrous to bear. Her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees right there in the middle of the dark street, watching her entire life turn to ash. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a jarring intrusion into the chaos. With trembling hands, she picked it up. It was a text from Atticus. Hey, babe. Just landed. Hope you and Lachlan are sleeping well. Love you guys. See you soon. Bye. Tenley read the message once, twice, 3 times. Every word was a knife plunging into her heart. Every heart emoji was poison, carefully administered. He knew. Of course he knew. He was in another state, building his perfect alibi, while hiring people to kill them, to burn them alive while they slept. And then he would return, the devastated husband, the grieving father. He would weep at the funeral, accept condolences with a solemn, practiced face, and inherit everything. The life insurance, the land, the bank accounts. That's what Lachlan heard him say on the phone. I'm finally going to be free. Free of her, free of his son. The nausea came with a sickening force. She turned and vomited right there on the curb. Everything she had in her stomach expelled, along with whatever illusion she still harbored about her marriage, about the man she had loved. When she could finally stop, gasping for breath, she wiped her mouth with her sleeve and looked at Lachlan. He was sitting on the curb beside her, hugging his knees, watching the house burn, his face illuminated by the flickering orange light. Tears still rolled down his face, but he wasn't sobbing anymore. He was just watching, with an expression of terrible, premature understanding that people who should love you can, in fact, want to destroy you. A 6-year-old shouldn't have that expression. Tenley sat beside him and pulled him into a tight hug, holding him as if he were the last solid thing in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. I'm sorry, she whispered into his hair, the words a desperate litany. I'm sorry for not believing you sooner. I'm sorry for everything. He held on to her, a small, resolute anchor. What are we going to do now? Mama. That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover that the man who promised to love and protect you actually wants you dead? They couldn't go home. A home didn't even exist anymore. They couldn't go to the police. Atticus had an ironclad alibi, and it was just her word and the fragmented memory of a 6-year-old against his. They couldn't go to friends or family. Everyone would think she was crazy, traumatized by the fire, imagining things. And Atticus was free, flying back at that very moment, probably practicing the look of shock and sadness he was going to use when he discovered the tragedy. They needed help. Help from someone Atticus didn't know. Someone who could understand. Someone who knew how to deal with what? Attempted murder. Arson. Conspiracy. That's when Tenley remembered her father, Langston Vance. Before he passed 2 years ago, he had given her a card. It was on a particularly rough day, right after his cancer diagnosis. He'd called her to his hospital room, taken her hand, and said, his voice raspy but firm, "Tenley, I don't trust that husband of yours. Never have. If one day you need help, real help, find this person." The card had a name, Solara Vane, attorney at law, and a phone number. At the time, Tenley had been offended. How could her father not trust Atticus? Atticus, who was so attentive to him, who visited him in the hospital, who even offered to pay for the best doctors. But now she understood. Her father had seen something she refused to see, blinded by love and loyalty. And he had, with prescient wisdom, left her a way out. She took out her phone again. The battery indicator glowed a perilous 23%. She needed to make a decision. Fast. Lachlan. Remember that card Grandpa Langston gave me? The one I kept in my wallet? He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the smouldering ruins of their house. I'm going to call the person on it. She's going to help us. At least, Tenley desperately hoped so. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. 3 rings. 4. It was about to go to voicemail when a female voice, raspy but firm, answered. "Hello, Attorney Vane speaking." "Attorney Vane, my name is Tenley. Tenley Thorne. You don't know me. But my father was Langston Vance. He gave me your number. I need help. Badly." There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt impossibly long. Then, Solara Vane spoke again, her voice different, now imbued with an urgent, almost surgical precision. "Tenley, Langston told me about you. Where are you?" My house just burned down. I'm on the street with my son. And my husband. My husband tried to kill us." Another, longer pause. When she spoke again, her voice was laced with a chilling calm. "Are you safe right now? Can you drive?" "Yes." "Then write down this address." Chan. Attorney Solara Vane's office was in an old brick building in a historic district of Atlanta. The kind of place you might pass 100 times without ever truly noticing. It didn't boast a flashy sign, just a small, faded brass plaque. Chandas. Vane Legal Counsel. It was almost midnight when Tenley parked in front, the street deserted, only a few sporadic streetlights, casting pools of weak illumination. Lachlan had finally fallen asleep in the back seat during the drive, exhausted from crying, his small body heavy with the trauma of the night. Tenley had to carry him, his dinosaur backpack still clutched in his arms. Before she could even ring the bell, the door opened. A woman stood there, silhouetted against the dim light within. She must have been about 60. Her grey locks pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses dangling from a chain around her neck. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, as if she'd been roused from sleep. But her eyes, sharp and alert, analysed every detail of Tenley and the small, sleeping child in her arms. "Tenley." "Yes." "Come in quickly." Tenley obeyed, stepping into an office that smelled of old books, strong coffee, and something else. A faint tang of determination, of battles won and lost. Solara locked the door behind them with 3 distinct clicks of deadbolts. "Put the boy on the sofa over there," Solara instructed, her voice softening just a fraction as she gestured to a worn but comfortable leather couch. "There's a blanket on the chair." Tenley laid Lachlan down carefully, covering him with the scratchy wool blanket. He remained deep in sleep, his face still streaked with the tracks of his tears. "Coffee," Solara offered. Tenley was about to refuse, but Solara was already pouring 2 steaming cups, her movements precise and unhurried despite the urgency of the situation. She handed one to Tenley and pointed to the chair opposite her large, cluttered desk. "Sit down and tell me everything. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." And Tenley told her. She recounted Atticus's trip, Lachlan's whisper at the airport, the desperate decision to hide and watch their house, the chilling sight of the men with the keys, the inferno, Atticus's text message, a sickening pretense of care from a man who wanted them dead. Solara Vane didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her fingers interlaced under her chin, her eyes fixed on Tenley, absorbing every word, every nuance of pain and terror. When Tenley finally finished, the silence in the room stretched, heavy and profound. "Your father asked me to look out for you if something like this happened," Solara said finally, her voice low. "Langston was a very smart man. He noticed things about your husband that you didn't want to see." The words stung, a fresh wound on top of so many others, but they were true. Her father had known. He had known Atticus was capable of this. He had suspected Atticus wasn't who he pretended to be, that he had married Tenley for access, for status, for wealth, that he was, at his core, a dangerous man. Solara took a sip of her coffee, her gaze distant for a moment. "Langston left me some things. Documents, information about you, and about Atticus. I thought I'd never need to use them, but—" She pushed herself up from her chair and went to a locked cabinet, its wood darkened with age. She pulled out a thick folder and returned, placing it on the table between them. "Your father hired a private investigator 3 years ago, discreetly, to check into Atticus's business dealings." Tenley's heart shrank in her chest. A painful, shriveled thing. And what did they find? Debts. Lots of gambling debts. Mostly, "Your husband has a serious problem. Tenley. He owes loan sharks. Underground casinos. Very dangerous people." Solara opened the folder, revealing bank statements, grainy photographs, detailed reports. His businesses have been bankrupt for 2 years. He's been using the money from the inheritance your mother left you to plug the holes, but that's almost all gone. Tenley felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. The wind knocked out of her. Her mother's inheritance, a sum of $150,000, meticulously saved, which Tenley had, in her naive devotion, put into a joint account because what's mine is yours. Babe. And he had spent it all, down to the last penny. Solara turned a page, and now the lenders are collecting. With interest, Atticus owes almost $500,000. People like that don't negotiate. Either he pays or— She didn't need to finish the sentence. The unspoken threat hung in the air, chillingly clear. "But I don't have that money. We don't have it." "So why the life insurance?" Solara asked simply, her eyes piercing. "You have a life insurance policy worth $2.5 million. Don't you? Your father insisted on it when you got married. Remember, said it was important to protect you and any future grandchildren." Tenley remembered. She remembered Atticus thinking it was excessive at the time, but ultimately accepting. She'd never questioned it, never thought. "And if I died in an accident?" She continued the chilling logic, feeling bile rise in her throat. Atticus would receive the $2.5 million, pay the debts, and be free. So, exactly. Attorney Vane closed the folder with a definitive snap. "And a fire is the perfect kind of accident. Hard to prove arson if done right. Hard to trace. And he has the perfect alibi. He was in another state when it happened. But I didn't die. And neither did Lachlan. And he doesn't know that yet." The way Solara said that made something click. A spark of defiant understanding in Tenley's reeling mind. "You're suggesting that we let him think the plan worked? For now." Solara leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Tenley, if you show up now, it'll be his word against yours. Do you have proof? Witnesses? Anything other than the story of a 6-year-old boy who could have misunderstood a conversation?" Tenley had nothing, just the visceral certainty in her heart and the terror in her son's eyes. "But what about the men who burned the house? Won't the police investigate?" They will, and without leads. They might conclude it was an accident, faulty wiring, a gas leak, anything. Those men are pros. Tenley. They don't leave tracks. Solara sighed, a rare display of exasperation. Atticus planned this very well. The only flaw in his plan was that Lachlan listened, and that you believed him. Tenley looked at her son, still sleeping soundly on the sofa. So small, so innocent, and yet he had saved their lives. So what do? I can't just disappear. My ID, my cards, everything burned in the house. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. You have me, Solara said, her voice firm, unwavering. And you have something Atticus doesn't know you have. What? Solara smiled, a cold, knowing curve of her lips that made Tenley see why her father had trusted her so implicitly. The truth, and time to prove it. Atticus will return tomorrow. He'll pretend to be devastated. He'll put on a show for the police and the neighbors. He'll look for the bodies, and when he doesn't find them, he'll know something went wrong. Yes, but by then we'll already be 10 steps ahead. Tenley didn't completely understand what she meant, but she was too exhausted to question, too drained to think. She could barely keep her eyes open. You and the boy will stay here tonight. Solara decided. There's a small room in the back. It's not the Ritz, but it has a bed. Tomorrow, we'll plan the next steps. Attorney Vane, why are you doing this? Why help so much? Solara went quiet for a moment, her gaze unfocused, lost in some distant memory. Langston saved my life once. A long time ago, when my own husband tried to kill me, she turned her gaze back to Tenley, her eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering empathy. I know exactly what you're feeling right now. Tenley, the shock, the betrayal, the fear. And I promised your father that if you needed me, I would be here. It is a debt I have the pleasure of repaying. Tenley swallowed the tears threatening to fall, feeling a fragile connection forge between them. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The game has just begun. Chair. Tenley slept for maybe 3 hours, but it felt like 3 minutes. She woke with Lachlan shaking her, scared and disoriented, asking where they were. It took her a few seconds for the memories to coalesce, and when they did, reality crashed down on her like a bucket of ice water. My husband tried to kill me. No matter how many times she repeated the words in her head, they still seemed unreal, a surreal nightmare she was bound to wake from at any moment. But it wasn't a nightmare, and the morning news proved it. Solara Vane knocked on the door of the small, Spartan room at 7A. Mel. Turn on the TV. Channel 2. There it was. Breaking news. Massive fire destroys luxury home in Buckhead. Fate of family unknown. They showed the house, or what was left of it. Just blackened walls and smoking rubble. A skeletal remains of their life. Firefighters still worked, sifting through debris, their figures ant-like against the devastation. And then they showed him, Atticus, stepping out of an Uber amidst the chaos, wearing an expression Tenley recognized with a sickening lurch, the one he used when rehearsing important speeches in the mirror. Calculated worry, measured horror. My wife, my son, for God's sake, someone tell me they weren't in there. He screamed at the camera, at the police officers, at anyone who would listen, his voice ragged with manufactured grief. The reporter explained that he was traveling for business, had just landed, and came straight to the scene, a desperate husband searching for his missing family. She narrated, her voice laden with appropriate gravitas. Tenley felt Lachlan shrink beside her, his small body trembling. He's lying, her son whispered, his voice thin. He's pretending he cares. And he was. You could see it if you looked closely enough. The subtle way he checked the camera angles before collapsing in a paroxysm of tears. How his eyes were dry, even with hands covering his face. How he asked the fire chief, "Did you find the bodies yet?" With an urgency that wasn't of someone clinging to hope, but of someone needing confirmation. He wanted to make sure they were dead. Solara Vane turned off the TV. plunging the room into quiet. He'll look for the bodies all day. When he doesn't find them, he'll start to suspect. We have maybe 24 hours before he realizes you escaped. And then he'll panic. And people in panic make mistakes. She sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed on Tenley. Tenley, I need you to tell me, do you know the combination to the safe Atticus has in his office? Tenley thought for a moment, sifting through the debris of her shattered memories. I know it. It's his birth date. Too obvious. But it works. He keeps important documents there. I think so. I never paid much attention. We need those documents, especially if he's stupid enough to have kept something linking him to the men he hired. But how? The house is swarming with police right now. It will be for a few hours. But at night, when he goes to a hotel, because he won't want to sleep in a burnt shell, we can get in. Tenley looked at her like she was crazy. You want me to break into my own house? Technically, it's not breaking and entering if you live there. Solara offered that cold, knowing smile again. And besides, we're going to need proof, evidence, something solid that proves Atticus planned this. I'm going with you, Lachlan said suddenly, his voice small but determined. No way. You're staying here. Baby. Tenley immediately rejected the idea, her protective instincts flaring. Mama, I know where Daddy hides things. His voice was still small, but it held an unwavering conviction. There are places you don't know. I know because I watch. I always watch. And he did watch. Her quiet son, whom everyone thought was shy, was actually incredibly observant. He noticed things Tenley, caught in the whirlwind of her adult life, often missed. He's right. Solara Vane nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. Children see what adults ignore. If there's something hidden, he'll know where to look. Tenley didn't like the idea. She didn't want to expose Lachlan to danger again, not after everything. But she also knew they desperately needed evidence. And time was running out. Ciao. The day passed slowly. A torturous crawl. They stayed locked in Solara's office, watching the news, watching Atticus perform his grotesque theatre. He gave interviews to 3 different channels, always with the same meticulously crafted story. A devastated businessman searching for his missing family, a father's fragile hope, the anguish of not knowing. Lies, all lies, through security cameras in the neighborhood, which Solara had access to through a contact. They watched Atticus being taken to the precinct to give a statement. They saw him return and stand in front of the destroyed house for hours, talking to neighbors, to police, to anyone who appeared, maintaining his charade. And then finally, when the sun began its slow descent, they saw him get into a car and leave, his figure diminishing into the twilight. Now, Solara said. She handed Tenley dark clothes, gloves, a small flashlight, then did the same for Lachlan. They looked like thieves about to commit a burglary, and in a way, that's exactly what it was. They drove in silence to the edge of the neighborhood, but they didn't go in through the front. Solara knew a discreet passage in the back where the wall was lower and there were no cameras, benefits of having defended the developer in his divorce. She explained with a wry twist of her lips. They scaled the wall. Well, Solara and Tenley climbed. They lifted Lachlan over, his small weight surprisingly light. On the other side, it was dark, the air heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and damp earth. 20 minutes, Solara whispered, her voice barely audible. Get in. Get what you need. Get out. I'll stay here watching. Tenley took Lachlan's hand, his small fingers surprisingly steady in hers, and they walked toward the house, or what was left of it. The back door, the kitchen entrance, was partially burned, but could still be opened. They entered. God. The destruction was total. Blackened walls, the ceiling partially collapsed, the pervasive stench of ash and chemicals, everything that had been her life, her safe haven, was destroyed. But they didn't have time to mourn. The office, Tenley whispered to Lachlan. Where is it? He guided her, his small figure navigating the ruined living room with an uncanny familiarity, going up the precarious steps of the staircase. Atticus's office was on the second floor, and miraculously, it hadn't burned as much as the rest of the house. The door was jammed, but Tenley managed to force it open with a painful grunt. The safe was there, embedded in the wall behind a painting that had miraculously burned away, leaving a scorched rectangle. Tenley entered Atticus's birth date. Beep! Green light. Open. And inside were documents, a stack of cash probably for illegal payments, and an old burner phone. Take everything. Lachlan's voice echoed from the other side of the room. Mama, look here. He was pointing under a loose floorboard, a hiding place Tenley would have never known existed. She lifted the board. Inside was another phone, a small, black leather-bound notebook, and an envelope. She grabbed everything in a rush, stuffing it into the backpack she had brought. Let's go. Quick. They were almost at the door when they heard voices downstairs, guttural and low. Are you sure nobody's here? Yeah. Police already released the site. We're just double-checking. Tenley's blood froze in her veins. She looked at Lachlan. He was pale, his eyes wide with fear. They couldn't go down. Whoever it was blocking their only exit. She grabbed Lachlan, and they squeezed inside the office closet, pushing aside burnt coats and moth-eaten suits. Her heart hammered so violently she was sure they would hear it. Through a narrow slat in the closet door, Tenley could see flashlight beams coming up the stairs. 2 men, not police. She recognized the low rumble of their voices. They were the same men who had set the fire. Boss said to verify if the job was finished, said one of them, his voice deep, with a thick southern drawl. Seems they didn't find bodies yet. Impossible. The fire was hot enough that nothing would be left. Maybe they already took them to the morgue. Better make sure. Check the rooms. Tenley heard footsteps separate, one going toward the master bedroom, the other coming in their direction. The office door opened with a creak. Lachlan squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. Tenley bit her lip, stifling a desperate gasp, afraid to make even the slightest sound. The man entered, his flashlight sweeping the room, its beam stopping on the open safe. Yo! Marcus, come look at this. The other guy, Marcus, appeared in the doorway. What happened? Safe's open. Wasn't like that when we left. You sure? Absolutely. We didn't even touch the safe. Just lit it up and left. Tense silence. Someone was here, Marcus concluded, his voice grim. Recently. The dust around it is disturbed. Think it was the cops. Cops don't steal cash. And look, there are small footprints. He pointed the flashlight at the floor, illuminating faint, tiny smudges in the ash. Too small to be an adult. Tenley's stomach dropped. A kid, the first man said slowly, the implication dawning in his voice. I think we got a problem. Marcus pulled a phone from his pocket. I'm calling the boss. He needs to know. Tenley couldn't allow it. If he called Atticus, if he told him someone had been there, that possibly they were alive. But what could she do? She was locked in a closet with her 6-year-old, unarmed, trapped. That's when she heard the scream. It came from outside. A female scream. Loud, full of raw terror. What the hell was that? Marcus bolted down the stairs. The other man followed close behind. Tenley didn't waste time. She scooped up Lachlan and ran. She went down the stairs so fast she almost tripped over her own feet, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The back door was open. They must have come in through there. They ran to the wall. Solara was there, panting, her face grim. Was that you who screamed? Tenley asked, as she helped Lachlan jump the wall. Then herself, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She needed to get them out of there. Did it work? Yes. Tenley showed her the backpack, bulging with its contents. I got everything. They ran to Solara's car, parked 2 blocks away, a dark sedan blending into the shadows. Only when they were inside, doors locked, engine running, and driving away. Did Tenley finally feel a measure of breath return to her lungs? Those men saw that someone touched the safe, Tenley said, her voice still shaky. They'll tell Atticus. Excellent. Solara glanced at her, that cold, knowing smile playing on her lips. Tenley stared at her. Incredulous. What do you mean? Excellent. Now he'll know you're alive. He'll know you have the evidence. He'll panic. And people in panic do stupid things, Solara said, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Tenley didn't know if she agreed with her logic, but she was too exhausted to argue. Back at the office, they emptied the backpack onto Solara's desk. Documents, 2 burner phones, a stack of cash, the black notebook. Solara took the notebook first, opened it, and began to read. The more she read, the wider her smile became, a slow, predatory widening. Bingo, she murmured. What is it? Is your husband meticulous or just dumb? Probably both. Solara turned the notebook toward Tenley. Look at this. Dates, amounts, names. He documented every cent he borrowed. From whom? And when he had to pay, he even had notes about conversations with the loan sharks. Tenley scanned the cramped pages. Everything was there. Every crushing debt. Every veiled threat Atticus had received. And then, on the last pages, scrawled in a hasty, desperate hand. Final solution. Tenley's life insurance. 2. 5. Yes. Accident. Has to look natural. Contact Marcus. Service. $50. 1,000. Half up front. Date. Nov 2. That was today, Tenley whispered. Incredulous. Or rather, it was yesterday. He wrote everything down. Why would anyone do that? Insurance, Solara explained, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. If something went wrong, he could use this as leverage against the guys he hired. Proof they were involved. 2. A desperate man's desperate measure. She picked up one of the burner phones. And I bet on these burners there's even more evidence. Texts. Calls. It took all night to examine everything. The phones were password protected. But Solara had a tech contact, a wizened, perpetually caffeinated genius named Cyrus, who managed to unlock them within hours. And there it all was. Messages between Atticus and Marcus. Need it to be a day I'm traveling. Solid alibi. Has to look accidental. Fire is good. Hard to trace. And then, a message that twisted Tenley's heart into a cold, hard knot. And the kid? Marcus had asked. Can't leave anyone behind either. Atticus had written coldly about killing their son, as if he were a minor detail, an inconvenience to be solved. Tenley felt hate growing inside her. A cold, sharp, righteous hate. She was no longer the woman who had married, believing she had found true love. She was a mother, primal and fierce, protecting her child. And mothers, she realized, were dangerous when their children were threatened. Is this enough to arrest him? Tenley asked, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Enough to arrest, convict, and throw away the key. Solara confirmed, her expression grim. But we need to do it right. If we hand this to the wrong police, Atticus has enough money and connections to make it disappear. Or worse, to make you disappear. So, what do we do? Solara thought for a moment, her gaze distant, contemplating the intricacies of their next move. I know an honest detective. Detective High Tower. Homicide. Incorruptible. If we present the case to him with all this proof, Atticus has nowhere to run. When? Tomorrow morning. But before that... Solara looked at her phone. Your husband has already tried to call you 7 times in the last hour and sent 15 texts. Tenley picked up her phone. It was on silent, but the screen lit up with notification after notification, a frantic deluge of digital communication. Tenley. For God's sake. Where are you? Babe, I'm desperate. Please answer me. Police said they didn't find your body. Where are you? Are you hurt? Tenley. Answer me. And the most recent one, sent 5 minutes ago. I know you're alive. And I know you took the things from the safe. We need to talk. Urgent. Shout. The mask had fallen. He knows, Tenley said. A chill. He knows, Tenley said. A chill running through her. Not of fear, but of grim satisfaction. Perfect. Answer him. What? Are you crazy? Answer him. Tell him you want to meet him in a public place tomorrow morning. Why? Solara Vane smiled. That knowing, cold smile Tenley was quickly learning to both fear and admire. Because we're going to give him a chance to hang himself. Tenley typed the response with shaking fingers. Centennial Olympic Park near the fountain. Tomorrow. 10:00 ma. Come alone. So. Atticus's reply came in seconds. I'll be there. Tenley. We need to talk. Things aren't how you think. Things aren't how you think. As if Tenley were the deluded one, the naive wife fabricating fantasies, as if she hadn't seen two men torching her house with her own keys, as if she hadn't listened to his cold, calculated plans for her and their son. Perfect, Solara said, her voice cutting through Tenley's seething thoughts. Tomorrow morning you meet him, but you won't be alone. She explained the plan. It was risky, perhaps insane, but it could work. Detective Hightower, a homicide detective known for his incorruptibility, agreed to help when Solara called and explained the situation. He would position plainclothes officers throughout the park. Wiretaps. Hidden cameras. All they needed was to make Atticus confess. He's never going to confess, knowing he might be recorded. Tenley argued, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. He doesn't need to confess with words, Solara replied, her gaze unwavering. He just needs to act, and desperate men always act. That night, Tenley couldn't sleep. She kept imagining the meeting, what she would say, how she would look into the eyes of the man who had tried to kill her and pretend to be rational, unaffected. Lachlan slept peacefully beside her in the small room, finally at peace after days of terror. At least one of them could rest. At 9:30 the next morning, they were in position. Tenley sat on a bench in Centennial Park, wearing a jacket with a built-in wire, its presence a small, reassuring weight against her skin. Lachlan was safe in Solara's office, watching everything through a feed the police had set up. A digital guardian angel, Detective Hightower and his team were scattered around the park, disguised as tourists, hot dog vendors, people walking dogs, blending seamlessly into the morning crowd. And then Tenley saw Atticus. He showed up promptly at 10:00 mept. He wore wrinkled clothes, probably the same from yesterday, deep dark circles under his eyes, an unshaven beard shadowing his jaw. For the first time since Tenley had met him, he looked genuinely human, vulnerable. But Tenley knew the truth beneath the facade. He saw her and practically ran across the lawn. Tenley. Thank God you're okay. He tried to hug her, his arms reaching, but Tenley stepped back, a wall of ice between them. Don't touch me. The mask slipped for a second. Tenley saw pure, unadulterated rage flash in his eyes before he swiftly reverted to his carefully constructed expression of concern. Babe, I know you're scared, but you have to listen to me. Listen to you. Listen to you say what? Atticus. That it was all a mistake. That the men who burned our house with our keys were just burglars. He blinked, his mind visibly calculating, adjusting to the sudden, unwelcome shift in her demeanor. You saw... I saw everything. I was there. Lachlan and I saw everything. He went pale, the colour draining from his face, leaving it ashen. He looked around nervously, his eyes darting from face to face in the park, searching for unseen threats, for listening ears. Not here. Let's go somewhere private. I'm not going anywhere with you. Tenley kept her voice steady, remarkably calm, even though her heart was racing, a frantic drum against her ribs. Talk here. Now. Why did you try to kill me? I didn't. It wasn't like that. He ran a hand through his already dishevelled hair, a gesture of exasperation. Tenley. Don't you understand? I'm in trouble. I owe a lot of money to very dangerous people. They threatened you. They threatened Lachlan. So, you decided to kill us instead. What logic is that? Tenley's voice rose, a sharp edge of disbelief cutting through her practiced calm. No, I was going to get you out of the country. With the insurance money, we could start over somewhere else. Far from those guys. It was a lie so blatant, so transparently false, that Tenley almost laughed. You're talking about the insurance that only pays out if I die. He froze. His eyes widened, a dawning horror on his face as he realized his fatal error. Tenley? He changed tactics, his voice suddenly sharp, threatening. You took things from my safe. I need you to give them back. Now. The black notebook. The evidence that you planned everything. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. You don't understand what you're doing. If you give that to the police, I go down. And if I go down, the guys I owe will come after you. Either way, you're not safe. But at least it won't be you trying to kill me. The rage finally exploded. The carefully constructed mask of concern shattered, revealing the true monster beneath. You were always so naive. You think I married you. Why? For love, he scoffed. A bitter, dismissive sound. You were a spoiled girl with daddy's money. It was just for that. It hurt. Even knowing it was true, it hurt to hear it articulated so coldly, so cruelly. And Lachlan, our son, the brat, he spat the words, venom dripping from each syllable. He was always weird, too quiet, watching everything. Freak kid. And there it was, the true hate. It wasn't just about the money, about his debts. He truly despised them, the mother and child who were simply obstacles to his freedom. That's when Tenley heard Detective Hightower's calm, steady voice in her ear through the wire. We have enough. Move in. Team. Suddenly, the park erupted. The tourists stood up, shedding their disguises. The vendors abandoned their carts. Everyone converged on Atticus, badges in hand, their movements swift and coordinated. Atticus Vance, you are under arrest. His face contorted through 5 emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, confusion, rage, fear, and finally, a dawning, terrifying acceptance. He had lost, but before they could cuff him, he did something no one expected. He ran. He sprinted through the park, knocking people over, jumping benches. A desperate, cornered animal. The police went after him, but he had a head start and was running directly toward Tenley. She didn't have time to react. He grabbed her, his hand clamping down on her arm with bruising force, pulling something from his waistband, a knife. He pressed the cold, unforgiving blade against her neck. Nobody moves, he screamed, his voice raw, unrecognizable, filled with a primal, desperate fury. Or I kill her. I swear I'll kill her. Detective Hightower stopped 10 feet away, hands raised, a picture of calm authority. Calm down. Atticus, you don't have to do this. Of course, I do. She ruined everything. Everything. The blade pressed harder. Tenley felt a thin trickle of warmth, of blood, run down her neck. Her brain went into a primal panic mode. But then she remembered Lachlan, her son, watching everything through a screen. Safe, but witnessing. She couldn't let him see her die. Atticus, Tenley said, forcing herself to keep her voice calm, steady, ignoring the razor's edge at her throat. You're not going to do this. Don't tell me what I am or am not going to do. He roared, his eyes wild. You're not going to do it because you're a coward. You always have been. Tenley turned her head slightly, looking him directly in the eyes, her gaze unflinching. Cowards don't kill while looking someone in the eye. They hire other people. And even at that, you failed. The knife trembled in his hand, his grip wavering, caught off guard by her defiance, by the raw truth of her words. And in that crucial second of hesitation, something happened. A shot. Not to kill, but to incapacitate. A sniper Tenley hadn't even seen, positioned on a rooftop overlooking the park, hit Atticus's hand. The knife dropped with a clatter. He screamed in pain. A high, animalistic sound, and in seconds, he was on the ground, handcuffed, surrounded by officers, his desperate flight brought to an abrupt, humiliating end. Tenley fell to her knees, shaking uncontrollably, her legs having given out from under her. Detective Hightower was instantly by her side, helping her up. It's okay. It's over. But it didn't feel over. Nothing felt real. She watched Atticus being dragged to the squad car, screaming, kicking, threatening. This doesn't end here. Tenley, you're going to pay. You're going to pay. Empty. All his threats were empty now. So, Atticus's trial was fast, almost a formality. With all the evidence, the meticulously documented black notebook, the burner phones filled with incriminating texts and calls, the recordings of their meeting in the park, the testimony of the men he hired who, faced with irrefutable evidence, cut a plea deal. There was no defense. His lawyers tried to plead temporary insanity, tried to argue he was coerced by the loan sharks, tried every legal maneuver in the book. It didn't work. Atticus Vance was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud. The list of his crimes was long and damning. Tenley didn't go to the sentencing. She never wanted to see his face ever again. But Solara went. She sent Tenley a text when the verdict came down. Justice is served. Chet. Justice. The word seemed strange, almost hollow, because it didn't seem fair that 8 years of her life had been a lie. It didn't seem fair that her son had to grow up knowing his own father had tried to kill him. But at least they were alive. And free. In the following months, Tenley had to rebuild everything. Literally everything. Documents, identity, bank accounts, a new home. She gained access to the home insurance money. Ironic, since Atticus had burned it down to get a different insurance payout. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over. A clean slate from the ashes. Solara helped her with all the paperwork, navigating the labyrinthine legalities. More than that, Solara became a friend, a steady, unwavering presence. Maybe the first true friend Tenley had ever had. Your father knew I was going to need you one day, Tenley told Solara one afternoon, drinking tea in the new, modest apartment she had rented in Decatur. How did he know about Atticus? A father's intuition. Solara smiled. A rare, softer expression. Or maybe he saw things that you, being in love, didn't want to see. Little signs. The way Atticus looked at your family's money, how he asked about inheritances, how irritated he got when you talked about working. Solara was right. The signs had always been there. Tenley was the one who chose to ignore them, blinded by affection and a desperate desire for the perfect life Atticus had so skillfully mimed. Lachlan, too, was rebuilding. He started therapy, a kind, patient woman who specialized in childhood trauma. At first, he didn't want to talk about what had happened, retreating into himself. But over time, slowly, painstakingly, he began to open up. The therapist said he was resilient. Children were stronger than Tenley had ever imagined. But even strong, he had nightmares. He would wake up screaming, eyes wide with terror, crying that there was fire, that he couldn't get out, that his daddy was coming. On those nights, Tenley stayed with him, held him tight, hummed the gospel songs she used to sing to him when he was a baby, and slowly, he would drift back to sleep, cradled in her arms. "Mama," he asked her one night, a few months after the trial, his voice small in the darkness. "Do you still love Daddy?" The question caught Tenley off guard, a shard of unexpected pain piercing her fragile peace. "Why do you ask that?" "Because he was bad, really bad. But he's still my daddy, and I don't know if it's wrong to miss him sometimes." Tenley's heart broke. a fresh crack in the mended pieces. She pulled him into a tight hug. It's not wrong. Baby, he is your dad. And the part of him you knew, the part that played catch with you, that took you to the park, that part felt real. Or at least you believed it was. And there's no problem missing that. But he tried to hurt us. He tried. And that was horrible and unforgivable. But your feelings are yours. You can miss the dad you thought you had and still be angry about what he did. Both things can exist together. He stayed quiet for a while, processing her words, then whispered, I saved you, right? Mama, you saved us. You saved me. And you saved yourself. You are my hero. Lachlan. He smiled. A small smile, but genuine, a glimmer of light in the darkness. And in that moment, Tenley knew they were going to be okay. Not immediately, not magically, but eventually. Tenley started working again, something Atticus had never allowed, subtly undermining any attempts she made to pursue a career. She got a job at a non-profit in Atlanta that helped women victims of domestic violence. It seemed appropriate, a twisted full circle. She understood what they were going through, the fear, the shame, the insidious feeling that somehow it was their fault. And now, she could say from her heart, with the weight of her own experience behind her, it is not your fault. It never was. Attorney Solara Vane offered Tenley a partnership in her firm a year later. You have talent for this, Tenley, and passion. It would be a waste not to use it. Tenley accepted. She went back to school, enrolling in an accelerated law program, devouring textbooks, studying late into the night after Lachlan was asleep. It wasn't easy, going back to books at 34, while raising a child and grappling with trauma, was challenging. But she passed the Georgia bar exam on her first try. She became an attorney, specializing in family law and domestic violence cases. She used the pain, the betrayal, the fear to help other people, to give them a voice, and in some profound way that helped heal her own pain. 3 years after the fire, Tenley and Lachlan moved into a real house. Small, simple, but theirs. Lachlan chose his own room, painting the walls a vibrant blue. But no superheroes this time. Mama, I'm grown now, he'd declared. He filled it with posters of black astronauts and scientists. When I grow up, I'm going to be an engineer, he announced one evening, his eyes bright with possibility. Or an architect. Haven't decided yet. Tenley laughed. A genuine, joyful sound. You can be both. My love. Seriously, you can do that. You can do anything you want. Son. And she believed that, because they had survived the impossible, what was a little ambition compared to that? Every now and then, Tenley thought about Atticus, mostly when she signed the divorce papers, which he contested, of course, but lost, or when she saw a snippet of news about him in prison. Apparently, he wasn't adapting well. She felt pity, not rage sometimes, a flicker of residual humanity, but mostly nothing. He had become irrelevant, a footnote in her history, not the main chapter. Life went on. Lachlan grew, a strong, healthy boy. Tenley grew with him. She learned to trust again, not blindly, never blindly again, but with wisdom. She learned that red flags existed for a reason, that intuition wasn't paranoia, but a vital internal compass. And she learned that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the most deeply. But she also learned that we can survive that we can heal, and even grow stronger in the shattered aftermath. Today marks 5 years since that terrifying night at the airport. 5 years since Lachlan whispered, "Don't go back home," and changed their lives forever. Tenley is sitting on the porch of their new house, a modest, comfortable home, sipping coffee as the morning sun casts long shadows across the lawn. Lachlan, now 11, is in the living room, diligently doing his homework. It's Saturday, but he likes to get ahead on his work, a habit he'd picked up from Tenley's own renewed academic pursuits. "Mama," he shouts, his voice a cheerful exclamation. Can I go to Malik's house after lunch? You can, but be back before 6. Okay. Tenley smiles at her coffee cup. He has friends now. Good friends. He stopped being that quiet. Scared boy. He's still observant. Always will be. A quiet watcher of the world. But he also laughs, plays, lives with an unrestrained joy, like every child should live. Her phone rings. It's Solara, or rather, Auntie Sol. They dropped the formalities a long time ago. Good morning. You're up early today. Tenley greets her, a warmth spreading through her chest. I have news, Solara says, and Tenley can hear the smile in her voice, a crackle of triumph. Remember that case we took last month? Mrs. Johnson. I remember, 40 years old, abusive husband, 3 kids, no money to leave. We did it. Protection order granted. She and the kids are already in the shelter. Safe. Tenley closes her eyes, feeling that familiar warmth, that profound sense of purpose. That's good. That's really good. That's why we do this, right? For these moments. Yes. They hang up, and Tenley stays there, thinking about how many women they've managed to help over these years, how many children they saved. Not in such a dramatic, life or death way as Lachlan and Tenley were saved, but saved nonetheless from toxic relationships, from insidious abuse, from dead-end situations. They transformed their tragedy into purpose, their pain into power. Mama. Lachlan appears at the screen door, a book tucked under his arm. Can I ask you something? Always. He sits in the chair next to her, his long limbs already starting to outgrow the chair, growing too fast for Tenley's liking. Soon. He'll be taller than her. Are you happy? The question takes her by surprise, innocent yet profound. I am. Tenley looks at him, truly looks at this extraordinary boy. Why do you ask? He shrugs, a typical 11-year-old gesture. Just wanted to know, because of everything that happened. I thought maybe you'd stay sad forever. Tenley takes his hand. It's not so tiny anymore. Strong and capable. I was sad for a while. Yes, and I still get sad sometimes when I remember, but I'm also happy, Lachlan, because I have you. I have a job I love. I have real friends. I have a life that I chose, not that someone chose for me. And Daddy, did you forgive him? That one is harder. Tenley pauses, searching for the right words, for the truth in her own heart. I don't know if I forgave him. Baby, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or saying everything is okay. Maybe it's more like letting go, not carrying that weight anymore. And in that sense, yes, I think I made it. He nods, processing her nuanced answer, with a maturity that belied his years. I think me, too. I don't think about him much. Just sometimes when I remember how it was before, but then I remember that wasn't real. And it gets easier. Such wisdom for an 11-year-old. But Lachlan was never an ordinary child. He grew up too fast, saw too many things, but he survived. And more than that, he flourished. I love you so much. You know that, Tenley says, pulling him into a tight hug. I know. Love you too. Mama. He hugs her back, then pulls away, already restless. Can I go back to homework? Only have math left. Go ahead. He goes back inside, and Tenley stays there on the porch, watching the sun rise fully in the Georgia sky, painting the clouds in hues of orange and pink. She thinks about how strange life is. 5 years ago, she was losing everything, or at least thinking she was. The house, the marriage, the security, the very ground beneath her feet. But actually, she was gaining something infinitely more important. Freedom. Freedom to be herself, to make her own decisions, to build a life based on truth, not pretty lies. And yes, it still hurts sometimes. There are nights she wakes up sweating, dreaming of fire, of choked smoke and burning walls. There are days she sees a man from afar who looks like Atticus, and her heart races, a phantom echo of fear. Trauma doesn't disappear completely, We learn to live with it, integrate it, understand its scars. But we also learn that we are stronger than we imagine, that we can survive the unimaginable, that we can rebuild from the ashes. Literally, in her case, her phone vibrates again. A message from the support group she coordinates for survivors. Thank you for the meeting yesterday. For the first time, I felt like I'm not alone. Tenley smiles, a genuine, heartfelt curve of her lips. She replies, "You never were, and you never will be. We are in this together." It's because of these messages, these small, profound connections, that she does what she does, because she knows what it is to feel utterly alone, trapped with no way out, and she knows what it is to find an outstretched hand when you need it most, like her father gave her when he left her Solara's card, like Solara gave her when she took her in, like Lachlan gave her when he had the courage to speak up. Even being so small, we don't save ourselves alone. We need each other. And now, Tenley gives back. She extends her hand to other women who are where she was, lost and afraid, and she lifts them up. The sun is fully up now, a vibrant, promising new day. Tenley gets up, goes inside the house. Lachlan is at the dining table, utterly concentrated on the numbers in front of him. He doesn't notice when Tenley approaches and gently kisses the top of his head. "Mama," he protests, but he's smiling, a familiar, boyish grin. "I'm trying to concentrate here. Sorry, won't bother you anymore." Tenley goes to the kitchen to start lunch. Something simple. Spaghetti with meat sauce, Lachlan's favourite. While she stirs the sauce, she hears him humming in the living room. Humming. A child who witnessed an attempted murder, who lost his home, who saw his father arrested. He is humming while doing his math homework. If that isn't resilience, Tenley doesn't know what is, and it gives her hope. Hope that no matter what life throws at us, we can survive, we can overcome, we can even be happy again. Not in the same way, not like we were before, but in a new way, stronger, wiser. The oven timer beeps. Tenley turns it off, starts serving the plates. Lachlan. Food's ready. He comes running, just like he always does when it's food. He sits at the table, that wide, infectious smile on his face. What's for dessert? Ice cream. If you eat all your food first, I can do that in my sleep. They laugh. They eat. They talk about the week, about plans for the weekend, about the science project he's doing at school. Normal things. A normal life. And it is beautiful. After all, it is beautiful to have that normality again. After lunch, Lachlan goes to his friend's house. Tenley washes the dishes, tidies the house, answers. Some work emails. Routine. A wonderful, mundane routine. In the afternoon, when Lachlan comes back, they watch a movie together. Some silly animation that makes Tenley laugh. He complains it's kid stuff, but he laughs, too. And when night falls, when Tenley tucks him in, despite him complaining that he's too big for that, he gives her a tight hug. "Mama." "Yes, thanks." "For what?" "Baby, for believing me that day at the airport. If you hadn't believed me, but I did believe you," Tenley finishes, her voice soft with absolute certainty. "I believe in you." He smiles, settles into the bed, a picture of peace. "Good night, Mama." "Good night, my hero." Tenley turns off the light, closes the door, and for the first time in 5 years, she doesn't feel afraid of tomorrow, because no matter what comes, she knows they will face it together, and they will survive, like they always survived. We all have moments that define us, moments when the ground beneath our feet shifts, and the world as we know it shatters. For Tenley, it was the raw, undeniable fear in her son's eyes, the whispered warning that unveiled a monstrous betrayal. Her story is a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are cloaked in the guise of love, residing in the most intimate spaces of our lives. But it's also a testament to the quiet power of intuition, the fierce protectiveness of a mother's love, and the profound strength found in believing in those who are most vulnerable. Tenley's journey isn't just about escaping a literal fire. It's about walking through the inferno of deceit and emerging, not unscathed, but transformed. It's about rebuilding, piece by agonizing piece, a life that is authentically her own, built on truth and purpose rather than fragile illusions. Her resilience, and that of her son, Lachlan, whispers a powerful truth, even when everything is lost. The core of who we are, our values, our capacity for love, our innate strength remains. We find allies in unexpected places. We redefine family, and we discover that the greatest freedom lies in choosing our own path, regardless of the scars we carry. If you saw yourself in Tenley's story, if you've ever felt trapped, betrayed, or forced to choose between a comfortable lie and a terrifying truth, know that you are not alone. The journey out of the darkness can feel overwhelming, but every small step of self-belief, every whispered truth, every outstretched hand accepted, builds momentum towards a life of your own design. Subscribe for more stories that explore the depths of human strength, the complexities of relationships, and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome. May your path be filled with peace, courage, and the unwavering belief in your own worth.